holiday, they ain't holding no chain.
Gordon front back comfort, and we get many. Bars and America songbox, paper is 19.
Four cars side by side in a wild friend ride with the roar of the engines leaving all doubts behind. As the wheels spin on, chasing dreams we can't hide. It's magic car life where legends never die.
Happy lawsuit month, everybody. The month of December. I hope you guys are doing well. Yeah, Mr. Balaco is here with me today. How you doing today, buddy?
Man, if I was any better, I couldn't stand myself. You wouldn't be able to stand me. My wife wouldn't be able to stand me. So it's doing great, man.
Did you plan on matching hats today? Is that what happened?
You know, I saw what you had going, and I just kind of wanted to match the vibe. So, yeah,
I hear you.
go full Hendrick vibe.
Well, buddy, before we get into our little recap of everything, I ain't going to talk too much about what's going on in regards to the lawsuit because, it's just started basically today and yesterday, right? So,
Man, just on the day one stuff, I was looking at the teardown with Jeff Gluck. They're doing like a day by day podcast, and man, it's just the amount of stuff that goes down, and like the amount of, I guess it's good that everybody's got passion, right? But man, this is a horrible look for the sport. I will say the fact that as a fan, it's so two-sided because I'm like, you don't get to hear this information, like how much the drivers make, how much the teams lose, how much NASCAR makes, how much the track makes, because that's all private, right? Even though, like, if the NFL and NBA, NHL, they always like publicize what a driver's contract is, right? But I don't know, it's just a little bit more privatized in NASCAR. So to me, that part is fun, getting to see those details that you don't really get to see otherwise. I just hate that this is the avenue in which we find out.
yeah, it's kind of like, when the NFL and the MLB had their shutdowns before. It's even worse than that because it's just in this lawsuit scale. It's not even just like, hey, the players are standing up for their rights. Even when that happened for MLB and the NFL, it's not like bombshells being dropped, right? And then we
Right.
have all these text messages and stuff between personnel that are in NASCAR and 2311 personnel and all kinds of figureheads. And then you got so much slander and stuff going on. This is not getting resolved by the Clash, if I had to guess, based upon how strenuous everything's been coming out so far. There's been a lot.
I'm telling you, man, this lawsuit makes like the Desperate Housewives of Atlanta look like saints, man. Like, the fact that you've got like in 2311, you've got some of the higher up guys calling Denny Hamlin a horrible businessman, and then even though they've made profit for like 3 out of the 5 years, which is like what team makes profit these days, and it's like, but then you've got like NASCAR executives and the president saying, Richard Childress is a dumb butt redneck, and they ought to take him out back and have him flogged, and it's just like, I'm like, this sounds like a reality television show. This almost kind of reminds me like you ever remember that show Lizard Lick Towing? It kind of reminds me of like all the staged fights that you see in between them and all the insults just back and forth. And it's like, except this is real. Dang shame.
I'll tell you somebody that's been really enjoying this is Jeremy Mayfield has just been going on a tangent here on social media lately. He's been digging this, of course. If you guys have never watched the Dell Jr. Download episode with him, it's a must watch. Because you can believe it or you can't believe it, whatever side of the fence, it is a must listen at least, because it's just wild, the stuff that comes out of his mouth.
And what's terrible too is like the fact that, like, on face value, you wouldn't think that the executive body would have such a disdain for somebody. But when you look at what they said about Childress, who, oh, by the way, was Dale Sr.'s owner, you ain't helping yourselves, NASCAR. That ain't a good look. And I think that's why, if you remember about not Homestead, Phoenix time. I'm glad the championship is going to Homestead, but around Phoenix time, you see NASCAR like, you know what, guys, what we settle this, I think it'd be a good idea to settle. And boy, you see why they were wanting to settle about right now. It's
It's like
terrible.
I was told Austin, it's like the group chat that you and your friends had just got leaked to like the grand masses. This is what this equates to.
Yeah,
I, it's terrible.
yeah.
You definitely don't see stuff like this about Roger Goodell, or he did have one instance where there was something that happened. I don't follow NFL that closely, but it was a
He gets
long
booed
time
every
ago.
day, so
So does Jerry Jones.
yeah,
I mean, we're basically just sitting down where the gif of was MJ eating the popcorn,
yeah.
just
That's
watching
right.
this. It's
Yeah,
entertaining, at least. As
yeah.
much as you hate that it's happening, it is entertaining to watch.
You know,
So
I gotta give kudos to this Judge Bell. Oh my gosh, this dude's like it's how people used to talk about Big Bill France Sr., a no nonsense kind of guy. And it's like, hey, look, here's how you're going to do it. You're going to like it. And it's a shame if you don't, because you're still going to do it. That's exactly what this judge is like. He's like, yeah, y'all ain't going to be in my courtroom because y'all can't be civil.
it,
Like the president or the CEO of the 2311 or something like that. Yeah.
yeah, it's Christopher Bell's doing a great job judging, proceeding over this.
Yeah, it's starting to make some pretty big headlines because they said like out of all the jurors they interviewed, only like 3 of them actually knew that this was going on, and that was in Charlotte. So, but like I was listening to a news radio coming home, and then they announced it over there. Over that, I'm like, okay, this is getting some pretty big headlines. It's like Michael Jordan sues NASCAR. I'm like, that's an interesting way to put it. I'm like, so that's definitely going to grab the ears of people. Yeah,
Yeah, and they had to dismiss 3 jurors, I think, because one of them liked Michael Jordan, one was a UNC fan, and the other one, they said, like, quote, that NASCAR's running themselves into the ground. So they
yeah,
had to replace 3 of them already.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, Jordan Bianchi's and Jeff Gluck's podcast has been pretty good about. They give you some of the details, like on the jurors and like how funny some of them have been. That's been that's been pretty fun to catch up on.
I really like what they do with that podcast over there because it's different. They're not afraid to go out on the limb, mainly Bianchi rather than Gluck, but they always do produce interesting and fun stuff to watch, even if you disagree with like 90% of what one of them says over the other. It's a good conversation most of the time.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. But I gotta get
Alrighty. Well,
the main idea of our podcast today.
yeah.
Yeah, just from
What do you
one
think?
little what? How about we talk about the 2011 Coke 600?
Yeah. Hey, that's a pretty good race, I think.
Yeah,
Unless
good
you're a
race.
Dale Jr. fan.
Yeah, that's an unfortunate one for sure.
Yep. So we're doing a retrospective of the 2011 Coke 600. This year of 2011, I believe Tony Stewart won the championship overall that year. I think David Ragan got his first career win. Trevor Bayne won the Daytona 500 right that year in
Yep, he sure
2011.
did. Back when they did the tandem drafting.
Yep. This year was full of storylines. It was a good storyline year in NASCAR, but admittedly, if you watch this race, the racing product on the mile and a half absolutely is horrific to watch.
Like I'm sitting there, and I ain't gonna lie, man. I'm about 40 laps in on the recap, and I'm like, why was there 6 figures of people there to watch this mess? Like, if only these people could see the racing product that the next gen car puts on today, and it it makes you go back in time and realize, my gosh, I had forgotten how bad this thing just sucked on my life. Like, I think like when we first got introduced to Gen, what was it, the Gen 4 car? Yeah. Now that was pretty good on mine. Yeah, that car was good everywhere. But when the car of tomorrow came out, man, it was like train racing around the bottom. And I think another thing too that hurt the racing back in that time period was, when they did a repave, it wasn't like how they do today where it's like this they almost like rigged the repave to wear out quicker. man, they made them repaves to last. And like it would take 30 laps, it seemed like, to even work up that top groove. Whereas now the top groove might be the more preferred line sometimes. So it's that was just it was like going down memory lane and thinking like, man, I don't miss that car product at all on these tracks.
No, definitely. I feel like most people, when they seen the car tomorrow come out, back when it first came out, everybody looked at it and they seen the wing on the back of the car. The first thing probably is the thing that stood out. Was like, what the crap is that? It's like this. It's like a Honda Civic import look rather than a muscle stock car,
Yeah.
and that turned a lot of people off at first.
Well, I think too, the car looked a little bit better once it did away with that wing and it went to a more traditional kind of looking car. 10 was the year they got rid of the wing, and then 2011 was like the second year of no wing on the car of tomorrow. And so you had almost had like some normalcy back into stock car racing, it felt like, on the look of the car on that year.
Yeah, I think it's like when the car tomorrow came out with the spoiler, it's kind of like when they did the All-Star race at Bristol and they moved the car numbers back and everything. It's like, whoa,
Yeah.
what just happened?
It's pretty jacked. Yeah. But I think some of my observations watching that was like, I do miss seeing those crowd sizes, right? I do miss seeing like the fact that Charlotte had backstretch seats is in not just backstretch seats, but suites above them too. It's just like, man, like I do kind of miss, just for the overall image of the sport, I do kind of miss those days where it did look like tons and tons and tons of people would be there. But granted, I mean everything in NASCAR seems like it's a two-sided coin, right? Because if you do like a little compare and contrast, like, are the races a lot more fun now? Is it more of an event? It's more of an event, but also too, like the fact that you're not dealing with all the people and all the traffic, it makes it kind of nice. I mean, really, I think they've done a good job of how to make it more convenient for a lesser size crowd and how to just make it fun. you know? And I think back in those days versus now, like, yeah, it was more of a purist form, like you went for a race, but now there's tons of autograph sessions outside the track. There's tons of marketing opportunities. There's tons of just everything going on. Whereas back in it, I don't remember much that went on like that.
Yeah, I think definitely in the activation of like partners and sponsors and stuff, giving free stuff out on the midway, stuff like that. Even if you're not necessarily going after your hardcore fan base, you can catch a couple casual people like that. Be like, hey, let's just there's an event going on at this racetrack. Let's go over here. Like, hey, they're giving free water bottles, blah 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 blah, and then you end up being hooked on whatever product that they were selling with that water bottle. And
Yeah.
then if there's that's with that midway, there's usually a car that is associated with that. And then you're like, hey, I'm gonna pull for that guy if I'm a casual, right? And it's like,
Yeah.
there you go. It's like a gateway. It's just like
Yeah.
you're gonna get in it somehow. But I guess just breaking down the race here. So the Coke 600, it's a long race, right? We go to it almost every year. We know that's going to be long. But the good thing about the Coke 600 these days is you get these things called stage breaks,
Yeah.
where it gives you a little bit of time to breathe. Where at the beginning of this race, there was not a lot of breathing room. There was not a lot of cautions going at the first part of this race. It was green for a while. It definitely got to the point where I was like, okay, where's the first debris caution coming out? Because I know everybody's got to be getting tired by now.
Well, and I love too, like, we talk about all the old school, like, debris Dale Jr. cautions. Well, this one wasn't really a Dale Jr. caution, but this one was more like a phantom caution, if you will, because I think the first caution on that race came out at like lap 74 or something like that. And the broadcast is like, caution's out for debris in turn one. And they literally don't show the debris because to me, it's like, there's not any. It's just, It's kind of funny looking back, but back then it was just like, I don't believe half the cautions you throw out for debris.
And they didn't have the social media people to call them out back then. The way that social media back then was, it was more casual, laid back. Everybody just wants to follow their driver. They're not sitting there pointing fingers. Where now, if you log on to social media, it's literally every week. It's like, why'd you do this, this, and this? This didn't deserve to be a caution. Blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
So I think that's progressed a lot throughout the years. Let's talk about the synergy of the booth, man. That's probably the thing that I felt the most. Maybe just the overall broadcasting product. Before I get talking about the booth, because I know that you talked about it a little bit. Why did we get rid of the cameras in the grass? So like when they're coming through the corner, it's just this wide angle. Why did we get rid of that camera shot? Because that camera shot looks so freaking good.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think, honestly, I like um, the turn two camera angle a little bit too. Just watching them off the corner, them getting their runs off just from a different view. That was cool. I mean, I get they can't do that because there ain't any grandstands there anymore, right? So, like, I'm realistic on that. But yeah, on um, on the turn, I fully agree. And I think to some extent they still do that some at Martinsville there in turn one, where it's kind of there in the turn, and at Phoenix there in turns 3 and 4. But no, that you are right. That was a really good camera angle, and the synergy, just the compatibility of everybody in the booth too, was great. Like, I almost feel like it's totally reverse, because even though I was watching a very boring product on the race, the broadcast did a pretty good job covering it as best as they could with what they had to work with, right? And now it's like the product to me is a heck of a lot better, especially on the mile and a half, right? But Fox doesn't necessarily have that synergy that they once had too, right? Now, I think in retrospect of this past year, I think a lot of people harped on Fox, but then and obviously there was no competing with Prime, right? After Prime, some of the TV coverage, to me, it kind of made Fox look okay, from my opinion, from this year. And so I'm not saying it's the worst thing ever. Don't get me wrong, but like Mike Joy, Larry Mack, Darrell Waltrip, Dick Berggren, and man, Steve Burns, RP Steve Burns, right? Just having that crew, it's like when was the last time you heard the name Dick Berggren in NASCAR? So that was really good. But yeah, I was just like, man, the product's not as good. Excuse me, the product wasn't great. Fox was great. Now Fox isn't as great, and the product is freaking great on the on the track. Yeah, just looking at it through the lens of a 2025 going on 2026 fan now, it's just crazy at the evolution of it all.
Yeah, Jeff Hammond too. Got to shout out him. He's part of that broadcast, and he's done a little bit of kind of what Larry Mack does now, right? He's kind of like the backstage guy. Talks about They were talking about Greg Biffle's issue with his cooling in his car, which is, they still had cooling back then, but it was not as high tech as it is now with this cool suit. There's literally like an ice box with a hose attached to it.
And it's kind of crazy because, like, going back to the stage thing, because, like, I hear some people talk about how, I really miss the endurance part of it. And I'm just saying, as somebody if you've ever done the Richard Petty driving experience, I can tell you just from there, when you're sure, I mean, there's a little bit of an airflow that comes in there through the window net. But man, when you're just kind of going slow and sitting there, while you're driving, it's going pretty fast, the adrenaline, you're not really thinking about it too much. But man, when you're pitting and when it's under caution and you're just sitting there, man, you feel like you are burning up. You're like, oh my gosh, can I please get back to racing? Right? It's like the stages produce more of an endurance factor than what those cars did. And you wouldn't think that face value, right? Because You think, man, they get a break with the stages. And in a sense, the break's good in some ways. You can have some specified time to hydrate. But yeah, wild to see the comparing contrast.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of my favorite things about the broadcast in itself is we've talked about this where it's like one thing that we think that lacks, not just on the Fox side, but just historically throughout the season, is them going from the start of the field to the back of the field and talking about all the different storylines and stuff. They talked about Ricky Stenhouse hitting the wall 3 or 4 different times. And then there's Ricky Stenhouse, and the top 10 at one point was competing for a top 10 spot. Rookie, first career start in the Wood Brothers 21 car,
That's a good trivia.
which is crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't even
Yeah.
thought about it. I was like, did he really get his first career start with the Wood Brothers? And sure enough, he did.
Yeah.
I mean, you would have asked me at the start of the year, it'd probably be like, oh, it's probably Trevor Bayne, right? In the 21, but negatory, Ghost Rider.
Yeah. You just looked at some of these guys' pictures and you see them now. It's like, oh my gosh. And also, another thing, when the broadcast is going through all these different cars, you think of all the sponsors that NASCAR had at one point too. Like when they were showing Carl Edwards leading with like Aflac. It's like, when was the last time Aflac was around? And then like,
Yeah, I think he had Scott's on this car. It was the
yeah,
Scott's car with the grass growing out of it. Yeah,
yeah, having Scott's, and then like Greg Biffle with 3M, and then um AARP with Jeff Gordon, and obviously Lowe's with Jimmy Johnson, iconic, one of the most iconic sponsors with one of the most iconic drivers. It was just a good reminder of like all the brand recognition. Like you could tell who was driving what car based off their sponsor, and that was good to see because like even if the number was a little bit distant, if it was the 3M car, yeah, that's going to be Biffle. And then the Scotch, yeah, that's going to be Edwards. Motorcraft, that's going to be the Wood Brothers. And which, granted, that's still a thing today, which I think is good, and I think the fan definitely appreciates, right? But to see even like Mikasuki on the '09 car, the one that Landon Castle was driving, and the one that Brad Keselowski got his career win with at Talladega in '09. Two like Miller Lite with the blue deuce out front, um, it just kind of makes you think, man, there was so much sponsorship dollars coming in at one point.
and now we've gotten to the point where there's 3 cars that have Monster Energy on them. At
On the other hand, it is good to see some of the sponsors that were there in 2011. They're still there. I think of like Geico, even though did NASCAR technically take Germain Racing sponsor? That's been mentioned in the lawsuit, right? But at least Geico's been around for a good while, and you still see sometimes they might sponsor a race at Talladega, or at least they did maybe 2 or 3 years ago. But I'm trying to think what other sponsors did we see that are still around in 2011?
I don't know.
Coca Cola.
Budweiser technically in a way, right? But not on the NASCAR level, but it's still kind of mainstream in a way.
Yeah. Well, Anheuser-Busch producing all their stuff with Busch beer, I guess same roots. But, I mean, obviously Coca-Cola with the Coke 600, so that hadn't changed.
Mountain Dew sponsors Chase Elliott sometimes.
Yeah.
That was pretty big for Junior for a long time of his career.
Yeah. So AJ Allmendinger.
Red Bull is now back.
It is. That's true. Red Bull. And even stuff like Caterpillar, Cheerios. It's just not there.
Army.
No, Army's not.
Army car used to be for a 39, Taco Bell is still not on a car. That's shocking to me.
Yeah. Long John Silver's is still on the car sometimes. Believe it or not, Bob Jenkins was front row. The dude was fielding Cup cars with Taco Bell and Long John Silver's, and he's at least still doing some Long John Silver's cars today. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. And then you look at trying to think what else. I think it's sad the fact that
Honestly, man,
yeah,
we still got many left. DeWalt, right, was still sponsoring Matt Kenseth, not on this particular race, but they're still around there with Christopher Bell.
yeah, that's true. I guess Quaker State. I think they might have been on Mark Martin's car, at least to an extent. You know, Quaker State's around with Suarez. Yeah, but that was another thing I thought of too. Is just the sponsor evolution and the fact that that was the Sprint Cup, and now the Cup Series has 4 primary sponsors and not just one. Just the little things you thought of.
Yeah, it's definitely maddening to sit here and just think about all of the progression. You could say the digression, of certain things, of sponsorship, but yeah, and there's teams like Tommy Baldwin Racing was driving with Dave Blaney in this race. Obviously, they're not on a cup level anymore. JTG was still around now. Now it's just Hayek Motorsports.
Yeah, trying to think of what else. Like the fact that even some people like Joe Nemechek was still racing back then. You know, back then they had starting park. That's something you don't ever hear anymore. That's not a thing on the starting park teams. Where I mean, these people they wouldn't even hire a pit crew, and they would just make the race, take a $60,000 to $70,000 purse, and use the same car, and that's really what you see with like front rows progression, because you're looking there and they're running 35th, and now front row they have some top tens. They have, but I think that kind of shows how tough it is to make gains in the Cup Series. But I think it still kind of shows the grit and tenacity that they have.
Yeah, most definitely. So let's talk about the race overall. The crazy thing about this race is, we talk about the parody of NASCAR these days, but there was a lot of people up in front. Of course, they were mostly, these big organizations, or Roush, or Richard Childress, Joe Gibbs Racing. I mean, it ended up being big organization, so you could argue, but the parody of just the race teams themselves, we didn't see a long domination fest that you've seen like this year with William Byron with the Coke 600. Obviously, he didn't win the race, but we seen him just put hand to tail throughout majority of that race when we were there.
Yeah.
But you had Kyle Busch up front. You had Carl Edwards up front for a good while. We thought cousin Carl, he was running away with it. And then Kyle Busch was running away with it at one point. And the broadcast really talked about how, the tires were, very confusing to them, because as it got colder on the racetrack, it did the counter of what they would have thought that they did for this racetrack with this car. And we kind of see that with this next gen car too. It's kind of like when we had the tire quote unquote issues, are typical racing physics is not going on. Like, what is going on here? And they were still trying to, dissect this at this point.
Yeah,
I thought that was an interesting point.
for sure. And I think too, I think some of it still stands, like when it comes to like just the Coke 600 is a long race. You're working through just one change after another on the car, because like you look at people who were super irrelevant at first.
One thing that I noticed is they always made sure that they were talking storylines for the most part. Like, the amount that they talked about David Ragan, to me, surprised me, I guess, because I think of front row David Ragan. I
Yeah,
don't remember Ralph Prodigy David Ragan and how different the perspective, because they were hyping him up. They're like, we know that win's coming. Could it be today? Like, they're like, this guy is the future at
yeah,
this point.
that was something I liked too. Jeff Gordon was my favorite mainstream well-known driver, but David Ragan was my favorite underdog driver. Like I remember when in 2011 he won his first race at Daytona, and truly should have won the Daytona 500 that year, but had a restart penalty. He crossed to the bottom way too soon. But yeah, that's like I don't even have any die cast oven, but I remember like back in the day, Cole, man, I remember you getting me some stuff like this right here. I'll pull out, but yeah, this was like one of the earliest times you kind of remember like David Ragan stuff with. Now that was a car tomorrow die cast right there, but I say all that to say that was in 2011. We're talking about that die cast was from 2012. And so in 2011, he had been racing for Roush for going on 5 to 6 years with no win. And so 2011 was like, okay, this is his year. He's got to do something. And he had the win at Daytona in July, but then it wasn't a win and you're in, right? But they had you had the chase with the top 10 drivers, but that year they did the wild card drivers. And you look at the kind of season Ragan had, if he could have won the 500 and Daytona that year, could that have changed his career? He had a decent amount of Xfinity wins, nationwide series wins. Yeah, 2011 was like a good year for him, but it was almost like, man, what could have been if he could have won a couple more?
Yeah, it looks like he finished third in the points that year. He finished one position in front of, now, let's see here. Let me count it.
Three.
Yeah, 3 times. Joey Logano finished 24th in the points for Joe Gibbs Racing. And David Ragan finished 23rd. Well, I think that's kind of when Kent talks about how bad Joey Logano was at JGR for a lot of his career. That kind of shows that, where you got someone like David Ragan, and that's no disrespect to him because I am a fan of him as well, especially now towards the later part of his career. Actually, I have a diecast here sitting here, but this is back when he was in the 38 Select Blinds car. It's a color chrome, so it's supposed to be white, but it's also really dusty because it's been sitting on the shelf for a while.
Right.
Like Joey Logano, top tier equipment. Tony Stewart literally was winning multiple races a year in this car.
Yep.
And Joey Logano got in this car, and it's like there's no talent. It's like, and now think how many years down the road, 3-time champion. If you're a 3-time champion, you're probably going to be a Hall of Famer. I'll throw it out there. Really, I don't hate him by any means. I think Kent's the only one.
Sponsor still around is Shell Pennzoil.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that was on Kurt Busch's car. Talk about a race for him. He had a horrific race for the most part, and then he ended up finishing 4th.
Yeah.
When we get to this ending. But, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on here. Quick question for you, though. What was your favorite paint scheme of this race, if you had to choose one?
Man, I tell you, one of the most patriotic ones was honestly David Ruderman's 00 Aaron's Dream Machine. That was a pretty cool scheme. Trying to think what else. I always liked McMurray's Bass Pro Shop #1 car schemes. Those are cool. Trying to think which other ones. This is going to sound like, what the crap is he talking about? As somebody who grew up like going to local tracks and seeing some of the cars who might just be out there, they're trying to just have some fun and make some gains on some Saturday night, and they might not have a lick of sponsorship on them. In the back of my head, I always liked Joe Nemechek's number 87 blue and yellow scheme. That always kind of just gave like some underdog short track Saturday night kind of vibes. And it's like, there's not a thing on that car, but he's out there trying to do his best. Trying to think what else.
You had Furniture Row with Regan Smith at this time, kind of like that same vibe, right? It's self-sponsored.
Yeah, all black car. Yeah.
I think this is the year he won Darlington, too, was 2011.
Yep. And, man, I remember 2011 with Martin Truex. He had come so close in 2011 and 12 for Michael Waltrip Racing. And I remember just watching him he would do so well, but man, he could not finish a race ever. He had such a big backing with Napa, but he really is what made Furniture Row racing later on. It's just crazy to look back on.
It's incredible. I think my favorite is probably between the 4 and 83 because they had pictures of like fans and stuff on the car, but the way that it came off, it looked kind of like camo-y, like a military camo with all the pictures.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really cool touch. And it was definitely different compared to all these other cars. But shout out to the yellow 18 car that we no longer see on the track.
Yeah. All right.
That's the sponsor that got away from NASCAR.
Big.
Surely it just looks weird not having it on every weekend.
Yeah. And I was thinking myself too, watching Kyle Busch go up the field. It's like, man, what would it look like today if M&M's wouldn't have dropped him? Like, you just see so many things that like altered history for some of these drivers. Yeah, completely crazy.
Most definitely. All right, I guess we'll get to the end and we'll kind of seal the deal here, right? Chaotic. That'd be a pretty good way to describe the finish of pretty much the last 78, 80 laps of this race.
Yeah. You always got to love a good fuel strategy race, right? And man, I remember where I was at this race. I was at my grandparents' house, and they had a big get together. Grandparents would always have like tons of people come in, even from out of town, and they would just camp out at their house, right? Kind of out in the middle of nowhere, out area, North Carolina, specifically a little unincorporated town called Blackwater. Right. And we were listening to the race on the radio, and we're hearing like Dale Jr. is almost going to win. And man, I'll never forget the shock that came over me when, we heard the radio guys be like, and he's out of fuel. And Harvick bypasses him and wins. I'm like, you could like hear a pin drop with everybody who was listening to that. And I'm like, dang. It was back then Harvick got the name the closer, right? And it was because of stuff like that he would get that nickname. At the start of that race, he was looking awful, like 28th, 29th. Looked like he wasn't even going to be a factor. They just kept on and kept on and kept on making adjustments. He was there at the right time with the right amount of fuel.
Yeah, it was definitely wild to sit there and listen to the announcers talk about fuel because at one point, and the way the announcers made it sounds like, oh, he's good on fuel. Dale Jr. ain't gonna have to worry about fuel unless there's another restart. And there was a couple other guys, and then on that last lap, I think Casey Kane was right there on the same row as him. He runs out of fuel. He shuffles the field up. They're all wrecking on the front stretch in turn one. It's mass chaos. And shocker, plot twist, NASCAR did throw a caution for once back in 2011. As soon as they would have seen that today, that's an instant yellow flag. They're like, oh my gosh.
For real. Too. And Cole, I know you can attest to this. Dale Jr. was in year 3 of not winning a race. And he'd been partnered up with like Lance McGrew and all them a couple years before, just not good. Was 2011 when he got with Steve Letarte?
Yeah.
And so
Steve Letarte was on the booth for this one.
So he gets a much better crew chief, and you're thinking like, man, this could be the year. And had such a good opportunity, and to be that short on gas was heartbreak.
Yeah, it's definitely one of those things as a Dale Jr. fan, especially at the time, was you kind of got used to it. For me, it was like almost like a callus, right? You work so much, you build up these calluses. It's how it was to be a Dale Jr. fan back when he was a part of Hendrick Motorsports. Of course, going from DEI to Hendrick was a big ordeal. People didn't understand the background information about what was happening, the controversy and everything that was going on. I never really felt like disappointed when he left DEI because, I don't know. It's just, I knew something was up, but I didn't know what it was, obviously. I was not an inside trader at that point, anything crazy, but I think that it was a move that he had to make personally, and I respected that as a fan. And I followed through when he went over to the 88, and I was like, hey, this is top tier equipment. And then see him struggle for those years was tough. But then you could say when he finally broke through, when he finally won that race, it was definitely a crazy moment to be had in 2012, I do believe, when he broke through with that win. So it was going on 4 years at that point. But yeah, even so, just to kind of go back before we get to all this happens on this restart. Before that caution happened, where they got on that initial green white checker, which turned into checkers and wreckers at that point, you could audibly hear the fans cheer. You don't hear that much anymore, right? When you hear a driver take the lead of anything, you don't hear an audible cheer. But when Dale Jr. was up front, you could hear the crowd, like the noise just slowly rising up, especially on the broadcast. I don't know about the radio because it's hard to really get that on the radio style at that point. I miss that. I guess the closest that you can get is probably a Chase Elliott these days when he takes the lead, but it's still nowhere near as like when Dale Jr. took the lead at any race, even if it was only for a lap. Just hearing the energy of the crowd from the TV screen, not even being at a race, you can just hear it, like the level. It's just on a different sound wave, I guess, right?
Yeah, yeah. I would say Chase Elliott. Um, that would be, um, that would probably be the most equivalent, but it's still not apples to apples, right? Because you got, whereas at Charlotte you might have 70,000 fans and maybe 45,000 of them have Chase gear on at the most, right? Maybe 40,000. Whereas back then you might have had 110,000 and maybe 70,000 people were having junior stuff on it. Still doesn't quite compare, but yeah, I'd say he's the easiest comparison to this day.
So that restart, we were talking about the mass chaos and whatever, is what people may forget. Obviously, we seen what happened to Casey Kane on the front row. Looked like he was going to win the race at one point. Had this really fast car, and then runs out of gas on that restart, falls like a rock, creates that chaos throughout the field. There's people in the grass, or turn around, but Kevin Harvick and Denny Hamlin were racing for second, and Denny Hamlin was in front of Kevin Harvick. The only reason that Kevin Harvick won is because Denny Hamlin also ran out of gas, because Denny Hamlin still had position on Kevin Harvick. But when he ran out of gas, he ran out just a little bit before Dale did, because I think Hamlin went from like 3rd to 11th on the leaderboard, maybe 10th. And then Dale only ended up finishing 7th, so he's ended up finishing a little bit ahead. So obviously there's a little bit of a difference there. But if Hamlin has an extra half a second on the gas at next pit stop, he could have been your winner over Kevin Harvick, right? But it just worked out where Kevin Harvick was able to pass both of them for the win, which was a big win for them. It was a good momentum shifter. Mr. Childress was delighted at that point. I can tell you that. That man's smile in victory lane was crazy. I wonder if they were talking about the flogging back then in 2011 compared to.
That's a good question.
But just what was your takeaways for this ending, other than, obviously Dale, anybody that's a fan of the sport was heartbroken over that. But what about all the other things? The ending was, you could say it's controversial. It'd be controversial today for them not to throw it or throw it. But back then it was just like Darrell Waltrip at the end of the race said, "Hey, I'm glad NASCAR left it in the hands of the drivers here."
Yeah, like some things never change, right? Big debates on when to throw the caution, when not to. It's just good that you have some consistent things, right? And then, yeah, all the chaos. It's just kind of like, for how that race started versus how that race ended is just two complete different sides of the spectrum, right? Yeah, I think the fact that they did leave it to the hands of the drivers, I think to me, it gave it one of the most memorable finishes ever. Whether it be for a positive or a negative, it's going to depend on which driver you like. Yeah, it truly was a shocker, and the fact that like you had some cautions where it's like what, and then you have a no caution, and it's like what? Like I said, I guess it's just good that some things never change.
Yeah, it was at one point of the race where we're sitting there and we're thinking, oh, this is gonna be green flag throughout the whole race. There may not be a single caution. And then it got to about halfway to 3/4 of the way. Especially you're sitting down and actually watching this race throughout, and you don't stop. It's a long race. There was a point where we're like, okay, we're not going to see a single caution. And then there was like 6 or 5 cautions at one time. It was very sporadic. It's definitely tough. I enjoyed everything that was going on with this race. I think that it's definitely a classic, and the reason I think it's a classic is because the ending obviously is probably the timestamp there. But for me, going back and seeing like what Blake mentioned, there's drivers like Carl Edwards in the Scott's car. You got 29 Budweiser wins, but it's not just like the red Budweiser, it's like the blacked out looking 29 Budweiser. You got UPS, a big sponsor with the young gun David Ragan at the time. 2011 gets that win finally, and then the next year goes to front row. You know, that's crazy in itself. Kurt Busch in the 22, and that was before the whole arc, what happened with him. There's just so many names. Marcus Ambrose getting the top 10. Juan Pablo, of course, in the 42, uh, ended up finishing, I think, 12th in this race. Collectively, it may not be the most amazing race on the. I know it's going to be good racing throughout, but it's just there's so much nostalgic feel of this race. There's so many sponsors, so many names. There's so many different aspects that you could truly sit down and appreciate as a NASCAR fan. So that's the reason I picked it. It was kind of in that era of NASCAR where I wasn't a huge fan. I didn't like this car tomorrow. At this point, probably just like I said, I was calloused by all the Dell Jr. Throughout the years, and you just get to the point you're like, man, I about can't stand watching NASCAR because anytime my guy gets close, it's just like, yeah, he's gonna find some other way to lose it. Gas, gets punted out of the way at Martinsville by Kyle Busch. Just different ways to not necessarily lose races. Just is something would always happen to him. He was kind of like the drama. You didn't really have a lot of this storyline stuff that you see now behind the lines, but the main storyline back then was like, hey, when is Dale Jr. finally going to break through? And then you kind of seen that with Chase Elliott, his rookie years at Hendrick. When is he going to break through? And then when he finally does, it's like his big event. I think this race is a classic, not just because of the ending, but just all the elements that's going on. Because it's a long race, but there's a lot to digest with this race.
Yeah, I totally agree, man. To me, it truly had a little bit of everything. And I think that's the beauty of some races where when it starts out, you might not think it, but that's why it ain't over until it's over. And just sticking with it and being a loyal, dedicated fan, you're going to have a lot of ups and a lot of downs. But I think too, as a fan, when you look back over all the years, like what you put into it is definitely going to be what you get out of it, right? And so you still see that, are there some fans that are not really around at the races anymore? Yeah, that's quite a bit of them. But there's still a decent amount of like legacy fans who are still there, and you get to talk to them and hear about all the experiences and get to hear like, hey, I was here when this happened, and I was at the Coke 600 a year that Junior ran out of gas and this and that. And I think it's just really good to reminisce and think about like, man, there were some good things, but thank God that some of the stuff has changed, right? And being that fan's voice on how to see just a continual better sport, I think is so important. Really going back and looking at some of these races, I think really does the fan some good, especially in the off season too, right? Especially if you're not really into football or basketball or hockey or all that that's going on right now. Going back and watching some classic races is good for the soul for sure.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you feel that way because that's what we're doing next week. I got a wheel and I'm going to spin it. And whoever, so if you didn't get to watch the whole podcast last week, Blake, I let the wheel of destiny decide who got to go. And I did not, and I mean, I did not want to be the first one that came up. And sure enough, I was. And like one ticked you. It was about to land on you, and then it just barely went into the yellow, which was my name. I was like, gosh, dang it. Like, this is terrible. So the good thing is I took my name off the wheel because I already have done it. So it's just you, Kent, and Austin. I have a pick for Austin. I don't have one from Kent. So if it lands on Kent, I'm just going to respin it. But I'm going to put his name down to see if he would at least got it. So let me see if I can pull this up. Wheel of names, baby. All right. So red is Austin. Yellow is you. That was me last week. And Kent is in the blue. So we will see who wins this. Oh, look who it is.
Man,
The guy that should have won last week.
I know, right?
I love how they spelled weave a winner.
Yeah.
Weave a winner. All right, buddy. Is there a particular race that you want to do for this retrospective that comes to your mind when you think of, old NASCAR, like a fan favorite for you personally?
Now, when you say old, like we talking like at least a different generation.
Doesn't have to be in the 80s. It doesn't have to be in the 80s or the 70s, but I would at least say it's not in the 2020s. So like from 2020 to 2025, can't have those. But from 2019 back.
Because I had thought about some beforehand. I think I have one. I've got it narrowed down to two. You want me to tell you which two, and then we'll think through. We'll think through how to
just take your time, buddy. It's all about you. Don't worry about me.
I'm going to go the 2014 Bank of America 500.
Pretty good race. Pretty good race.
Yeah. 2014 Bank of America 500.
I can guarantee you that one's on YouTube.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Because I've watched it before.
Yeah. Yeah. But that one is definitely special to me and definitely special to Cole because that was the first first NASCAR Cup race that Cole ever went to. And that was me and another guy took him to his first race that day. And so that was quite a memorable night for us. We almost didn't know if it was going to happen that day.
Yeah. Yeah. It was a little bit rainy, I think.
And so, that was the first, I was talking like, oh, the chase format needs to change, right? That was the first season of the elimination rounds. Believe it or not, it's crazy to think of. High horsepower on the mile and a half. And so, I think let's keep it at Charlotte. Let's go the 2014 Bank of America 500. And that's another ending that I would say is quite entertaining, wouldn't you say?
You could say explosive.
Yeah, maddening.
All right. Well, we will plan on watching that for you guys for the retrospective. We'll enjoy doing that. Yeah, that's basically all we got planned for this week on the Four Wide podcast with just two wide people this week. Hopefully, we might have a few extras probably filter in next week. Next week will probably be better to have four people because ours is probably just a little bit tainted based upon just our appreciation for what that did, not just for us racing wise, but personally. I feel like at race we really grew even more closer together because that was like the first, obviously that's the first race that I ever been to, but it's the first ever race that we both went to.
Yeah.
We got to the point now where we went to 15, 16 races this year together.
Yeah, for real. There was a time where we went to just one race together, probably every other year. It's so foreign to me at this concept at this point in life.
Crazy. It's like from 2021.
Yeah.
That's when I started going to like a few a year.
Yeah.
Few a year.
That's right.
And then last year, I don't think I'll ever be able to replicate what I did last year, 2024. That was a lot of races that I attended. Over 20 NASCAR ordained events. That's maddening to think about.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'm looking forward to watching this once again. I've watched it probably about a year ago. Yeah, I have a pretty fresh memory, but I'm gonna go ahead. I'll rewatch it again because dadgummit, it's a good race.
I thought it was a really good race. I mean, for that to have been your first race, pretty lucky guy. I ain't gonna lie.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you don't really, I say for the listeners, if you can't quite remember the 2014 Bank of America 500 off the top of your head, or maybe you weren't a fan at that time and you're like, what's going on here? You'll be glad you watched it because it definitely was eye opening on who could get mad at who for sure.
sure. A lot of mad. There's a lot of energy after this race.
For sure.
Some would say kinetic energy.
Yeah, absolutely.
Alrighty. Well, shout out to Wilkerson's Catering as always. They're our main partnership over here on the podcast. We really appreciate them. We really didn't have a lot of segments this week, so it's really hard to throw them in the middle of everything. We only talked about 2 things today, but we really appreciate them. They just had their baby, right? So they're going through a whole bunch. So congratulations to them. I'm glad everything went well. It's a tough process for what I hear, and I know that you're going to be going through it not too far along. I think a couple of months.
Yeah, this is pretty much why we're not going to tons and tons and tons of races next year. But
It's the reason that we pushed off a lot of our races.
yeah, I'm excited about our baby coming. It's gonna be awesome. Super excited. My wife and I are, and as fun as races are, don't get me wrong, I'm really looking forward to the joys of being a dad for sure.
Absolutely. I know that Wilkerson's still booking for next year. I know they had a spot come open for the end of this year, which is crazy to think about because how busy they are. They usually have this locked up by summertime, for what I understand. This is like the no go zone most of the time. Like if you don't plan this out ahead of time, you ain't going to get in. It's a very exclusive club over there, so it's like those suites on top of the NASCAR stadium. You gotta really be up and up to do that. They provide premium service, in regards to this catering, but definitely not necessarily the cost of a NASCAR suite because
Yeah,
some of those NASCAR suites, especially at them big stadiums, uh, I don't even think some presidents of other countries can stay in those things. But I digress. But shout out to Kyle over there at Wilkerson's Catering. Congratulations to their family and their business. They're continuing to blossom, and we're really appreciative of what they do.
yeah, absolutely. Been a super good partner for us this year, and appreciate him taking a chance on us. First year podcasters, but he's the kind of guy who's a grassroots racing guy, grassroots guy, and so it was always been a perfect partnership for us and for him. And so yeah, definitely reach out to Kyle for your next catering event.
And that's always in the description of every single podcast. You can find the link to his website. Shoot him over an email. I can tell you for a matter of fact, they will get back to you as soon as possible. They are. Now they got a lot going on with their family right now, but I know he's pretty quick. He's always responded pretty quickly if I've ever had a question personally. So you can reach out to him. And also, shout out to Glowing Glove. I know we're not doing the Pick'em series right now because obviously it's the end of the year, but we appreciate Glowing Glove jumping on and doing that. It's a fun little segment and really looking forward to the innovations and everything that we do next year for 2026. Any salutations you got left there, bud? Anything else you want to say?
I'll try to be better for next week for breathing and respiratory wise. Now, I'm still trying to had COVID last week, trying to get over, but it's been kind of therapeutic for me to talk a little racing.
You said you had COVID or bronchitis.
Well, I had COVID, but usually bronchitis ensues after something like either COVID or the flu or a cold or something like that just won't go away. So it's been a little bit of a double whammy, but I guess better now than at the Clash come next year.
Yeah, let's not have a repeat of that.
Have a
That was miserable.
Yeah, real.
I hope the racing is just as good. I just hope that doesn't happen again.
Yeah,
I'll make sure I clarify. Racing was great last year, but
yeah. And I felt fine about the race. Just I was the sickest sober person in Winston-Salem at that time.
I can attest to that personally. A sight to be seen. It was like a switch was flipped.
Yeah.
He was fine for 3/4 of the race, and then you see like the queasiness. It started to, like, you could tell it, and then of course when we got to the buses, you were just whoa. I was like, oh boy.
I think if it wouldn't have been for the gas fumes, like being nauseated at a race when it's about 40 degrees outside and being in the bus line where all you smell are bus fumes for an hour and a half, I can't imagine that helps out. Just from personal experience, I know that definitely doesn't help.
I think you're undershooting how long we stayed for the bus. I think it was around 2 hours, buddy. It was a long dang time.
It definitely, if it wasn't 2 hours, it felt like 2 hours. And it felt like an eternity when you're nauseated.
I think that's one thing I really hope that they improve this year. If there's anything that they improve at that racetrack, if they can get the buses, you get out 30 to 45 minutes, I call that a big win.
Yeah.
I call that a huge win this year because it was awful.
Yeah. No, that is for
And there was so many people pissed off
Yeah.
in that line.
That's
They were so mad.
Yeah, that's for certain.
Well, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. We will see you guys next week. Enjoy all the juicy banter that's coming out of this lawsuit that we'll probably be seeing for the next, I don't know, about 4.5 years, probably, if I had to guess the way that lawsuits are. They got to wring that thing out like a wet paper towel.
For sure.
But we will see you guys next week. Hop on the old YouTube, watch the race, enjoy it, and then you can sit here and listen to us talk about it once again. And you might catch up on a few things that you might have missed. See you guys later. Peace.